On the eastern side of Iceland, where the birch woods of Hallormstadur give way to a long slate-coloured ribbon of water, Lake Lagarfljót lies braided with fog. In winter, the fog seems to have bones. It lifts and settles as if the lake were breathing beneath it, some slow, ancient chest rising and falling. People in Egilstadir tell stories about the lake, about a serpent longer than farmhouses, about drowned bells tolling in storms, about a grey horse whose hooves make no sound on the shore and whose mane hangs with green weeds. Einar had heard them all since he was a boy. He had laughed at most, feared a few, and then grown too busy to do either. He fished. That was the whole of it. Nets a small boat with a stubborn motor early mornings that bit his lungs in too late evenings when his back seemed carved from basalt. He had a wife, Ragnar, whose hands could calm a skittish ewe and who believed in setting a place for the dead at Christmas. He had a daughter, Elin, who could whistle through her teeth and had never been frightened by a story in her life. The ring found him on a day of ordinary weather that turned odd in the middle, like a story with a strange stanza. The lake lay dark and flat, the wind was sideways, and the fog crept off the water like a tired animal. Einar was hauling his net in when he felt an unnatural weight, a drag like a hand grasping the mesh from beneath. There was no thrashing, no struggling, only a steady insistence. He leaned with his whole body, feet braced, the net vanishing under his knuckles as he pulled hand over hand. When the net surfaced, there were fish enough to make a prayer, plump Arctic char, shivering with light. A pike as long as Einar's forearm, and in the pocket of the net, caught through by a single knot, a ring. At first he thought it was fish scale piled on itself, a trick of water and light, but it clinked the way a coin does on a tombstone when he shook it free. It was silver, if silver can be the colour of the inside of a storm. It was tarnished in a way that suggested not time, but pressure. The metal was hammered with small ridges like ripples, and inside it ran a shallow groove filled with something darker than tarnish runes. He could not read them, but they looked like tiny roads, crossing and recrossing, as if the ring held a map of a place that did not exist on Earth. He did what a practical man does. He put it in his pocket and kept fishing. Only when he had gutted and cleaned his catch, when the wind had come about and the fog had thickened, when the boat nosed toward the dock and the water clicked quietly against the hull, did Einar take out the ring again. He wiped it on the hem of his sweater. It was not magnificent. It did not look like wealth. It looked like something that meant something to someone else. He turned it, and for the shortest breath of time, the groove of runes shivered as if a wind had passed along it. Runes do not shiver. He stared. The little roads seemed to have rearranged. "You're tired," he said aloud, the way men do when they need to hear their own sense in the air. But when he slipped the ring onto his smallest finger, because a ring unclaimed on a lake is not an ordinary ring, and who knows what harm you invite by trying to fit it to your life like a wedding band. It did not feel cold. It felt like a living thing settling into a warm place. He took it off, or tried to. His fingers had swelled in the cold. It resisted. He worked it free with spit, and patience set it on the thwart beside him and rowed the last few meters with his oars, because the motor had decided to sulk. By the time he tied up, the ring had slid to the edge. He put it in his pocket again. Some things are easier if you postpone deciding what to do about them. That evening, with the house smelling of char and butter, the lamps humming like old bees, Einar set the ring on the table. Ragnar frowned at it, the way a woman frowns at an unexpected guest who has not taken off his hat. Elin tried it on every finger and declared it like something from a drawer in a museum, not shiny enough to be stolen. "Throw it back," Ragnar said. And because it was Ragnar saying it, Einar did not shrug as he might have with another. "Find the place tomorrow and throw it back." He nodded because his face knew the shape of nodding. Inside him, something folded its arms. The ring sat between the salted butter and the bread. The groove of runes looked somehow deeper now. That night, Einar dreamed about hooves on water. He dreamed about a horse whose hide was the color of iron and whose mane was heavy with pondweed and jewels of water moving sideways like a tide. He dreamed that the horse put its muzzle into his chest through bone and muscle to sniff at his heart. In the morning, he was angry for no reason that made sense. He went out at dawn with the ring in his breast pocket. He meant to throw it back. He meant it the way a man means to drink less coffee or to stop using the sharp words that come easiest to his mouth. He meant it, which is not the same as doing it. He rode to the place the net had been heavy, found a shape in the fog that was either a birch trunk lying in the water or the back of something that did not need to breathe. And he threw. The ring skipped once 2 neat stone skips that made his heart oddly light, then vanished with a sound like a lid put on a pot. He set his net and went about the day. When he pulled the net in there, the ring was caught again by the same knot, waiting. The second time he did not tell Ragnar. He slipped the ring into his pocket. He told himself that winter was hard, that the year had been lean, that Elin needed boots and Ragnar needed oil for the lamp, and the motor needed a part he could not name, and the roof needed a kindness he could not give. He told himself that found things belong to finders unless otherwise stated. He told himself as if the words were a net that he could throw it back tomorrow. The ring listened. That was the worst of it. If it had been only metal, it would have been easier. But when Einar turned out the lamps and lay down with the lake's breath in the dark, he felt the ring's patience like another presence in the room. Something awake and courteous and waiting for him to speak first. It was not long before the catches grew odd. They swelled. Nets that had once come up with enough fish to keep a family for a week began to come up sighing with weight. Char like slabs of moonlight, pike with bellies full as if they had swallowed secrets. Einar bought the part for the motor. He sealed the roof. He turned away the coins Ragnar offered from the jar beneath the flower. When the neighbours frowned and whispered about a man whose nets always seemed heavy, he could say with a straight face that luck is not illegal. But luck in Iceland has its own laws. The roof stayed tight, but the wind was wrong all month. The ewes miscarried at Skard. Kari Einar's brother slipped with his hand under a crate and crushed 2 fingers flat as wildflowers pressed in a book. Elin, who never took to bed for anything but books, woke shivering with a fever that sent Ragnar to the birch grove for tea and had Einar stacking wood in a clumsy silence. The doctor came and went and said the sorts of things men say when they have only the old medicines left to try. When the wind put a knife through the eaves one night, Einar woke and did not go back to sleep. He lay listening to Ragnar's breath. Elin's little noises, the lake shifting in the distance as if turning over in its sleep. He slipped a hand to his chest, where he had taken to wearing the ring on a cord he had, without thinking, plaited from his mother's hair and his own. He had not made the decision to do this. It had happened to him as some things do. When his fingers closed around the ring, it was warm. He should have been chilled to the marrow, and the ring was warm. It was then that he heard the whisper. Not a voice, not in the sense of a human throat and tongue, but as if a thought had flown from far away and landed in his ear like a moth. "We fill your nets," the whisper said. "We are eager to please. You know why." Einar went cold in the honest way then. He pictured the place in the water where the ring had skipped. He pictured the hooves on the lake, gentle, stepping down through the surface, as easily as a foot through fog. He pictured the old stories he had laughed at and fed with his skepticism until they had grown too large in the corner of the room. "You want it back?" he whispered into the dark, his mouth dry. a smaller, separate breath in the room. The sound of Elin turning on her pillow made him jerk as if struck. He waited. The whisper did not come again. The ring lay in his palm like a living coal. In the morning he rode into town with the part for his motor. He did not want to go to the church, though he thought of it. He did not want to go to the blacksmith, though he thought he might ask for the ring to be crushed flat and melted into nothing. He went to the market, to the place where old women sell herbs and opinions. Bryndis was there in her layered skirts, a knitted cap like a nest on her hair, a nose that could smell lies the way a fishing dog smells home. She watched him with the eyes of a raven who is not expecting food, but is prepared to steal it if necessary. "Your ring smells of lake," she said, when he had not yet said a word, "and of a promise that was not made by you." "I found it," he said, knowing how it sounded even before the words left his mouth. "You did." She agreed. The lake didn't lose it. He told her because the market was loud and his shame did not yet have a name, and he needed someone to push him toward the right shape of thought. He told her about the catches, about the fever, about his hand on the ring at night, like a pilgrim's hand on a relic he does not really believe in, but cannot stop touching. "It is a bridal ring," Bryndis said at last. "Not for cows or women, mind you, for what is bridled in the lake, for what you name only with a spit over your shoulder." "Nykur," he said, and her mouth flattened. "You say it plain," she murmured. "Brave or foolish, the stories are old and have teeth. A waterhorse has no kindness or unkindness until you bargain with it. Then it becomes as kind or as cruel as your bargain. There was a girl once." Bryndis added, her eyes going far beyond him, to a place where there were no stalls and no winter, who put a bridle on such a one and made him plough her father's field. Her father ate well. Then the horse bit the girl in half when she grew proud and forgot to be afraid. "I am old. I have heard versions." "What bargain did I make?" Einar demanded, sudden and raw, "because hearing that you are a protagonist in an old story is a humiliation you cannot hold with dry hands." "I threw it back." "You kept what was not yours after it returned to you," Bryndis said, simply as if measuring cloth. "That is the bargain. When you keep, you are kept. The ring is a bridle. It longs to be on a mouth. Failing that, it will bridle the one who wears it." "Don't look at me like that. You asked me what shape of thought to use." "That is the shape." "Will it kill my daughter?" he asked. And because the word kill seemed too large to hold in the middle of a market, he looked down at the apples and cabbages as if they would be offended. "It will take what balances the catch you have been given," Bryndis said so quietly he had to lean to hear. "A fisherman knows balance. You cannot fill one net without emptying another. The lake does not care which net it empties. It is not a god. It is a lake. It has the horse in it, and the horse has its ways." "What must I do?" She took his hand the way you take a cut potato without fear, because you are used to sharp things. She turned his palm and ran a forefinger around the line where a ring had long since been imagined by the skin. "You must give it back properly. You must give it back with a price that is not money, because money is the least serious thing people have. The waterhorse does not eat money nor care about it. It eats the memory of warm mouths and the laughter of children and the weight a man thinks he can carry alone. It eats, and it does not pity." She let his hand go. "Do you understand what I am saying?" He did. And he did not. He nodded like a man who has learned that nodding is a way to keep the world from going sideways underneath your feet. He went home. He tried to be ordinary. He mended a net. He fed the sheep. He watched Elin sleep with her hair spread like dark lakeweed, and imagined the horse taking the sound of her laugh and his breath failed in the middle and did not right itself for a while. That night he dreamed again, and now the dream had a door and a way through it. The horse was there on the shore, not a nightmare horse with blood on its mouth, but a deep grey creature with a long head and liquid eyes the colour of mountain shadow. Its mane was heavy with weed and tiny shining things like pebbles. When it breathed, the fog made a shape around its nostrils. It smelled like the underside of stones. Its hooves did not disturb the water. It moved sideways and then forward, and then seemed to be nearer without having walked. "We fill your nets," it said. And this time the voice had weight and could be said to come from a mouth. "We remember our bargains. You remember yours." "I threw it back," Einar said. But even in the dream, his words felt like a boy hiding behind a table. "You threw me a mouth without a head," the horse said. "You threw a bridle without a jaw to bear it. You threw away nothing for the sake of looking as if you had given. You caught it again because it wanted to be caught. You wear it. You belong as long as you wear it." You did," the horse said gently, and the gentleness was worse than cruelty. "The words you use for yourself provide a husband-father are bridles you willingly bit. This is another. Will you pay your balance, Einar, who knows the weight of nets? Or shall I choose for you?" He woke with his mouth full of lake. He coughed, and Ragnar woke and laid a hand on his shoulder, and he almost told her everything. He did not. He was ashamed of not telling her almost as much as he was ashamed of the ring, and shame is a pair of hands more efficient than any bridle. The next day he put the motor away and took the oars. He rowed mid-lake to the place where, if stories were maps, the serpent turned in winter and brushed the bottom of boats with its hair. He took the ring from around his neck and set it on his tongue and tasted metal, and something that was not metal. Something like the taste of the air just before lightning. He took it off his tongue and held it in his wet palm. "What do I have that is not money?" he asked the lake. The lake did not answer. It has its dignity. But the fog thickened, and a path opened in it, a long arrow of clearer air that pointed him to the east, toward the birch woods. He rode. At the edge of the woods lived Helga, who kept stories the way some keep bees. They made a humming around her that was not unpleasant, and could sting if you blundered against it. She was not old nor young, but time had turned her into a tool with only one use, which is another way of saying she was a holy thing. "You have something that does not belong to your life," she said, before he had knocked, before he had stepped out of his boat. "And it has a mouth, and it is hungry." He told her what Bryndis had told him. Helga shook her head, once a small movement like a bird adjusting. "Bryndis smells bargains. I keep the words that explain them. The ring you hold is not an ordinary bridle, though she is right to call it that. It was made to fit the mouth of a water horse when the horse chooses to be led, which is seldom and never for free. There was a girl, once another version of Bryndis's story perhaps, who loved such a horse. She did not bridle it. She asked to be allowed to ride it. He let her. That is unheard of, but stories are made of what is not heard of. The ring was their promise to each other. She wore it on her finger when they parted. He carried the shape of it in his mouth like a memory. When she died, they buried her with it. The lake felt cheated. Lakes are jealous. It took the ring back in a flood and kept it. People foolish enough to fish in the wrong place found it. People eager enough to keep it paid and paid. And here you are. So it is a lover's ring. Einar said, stupid with grief for a girl dead long ago, whom he would never have liked in life. "It is a bridle and a promise and a mouth," Helga said. "Do not confuse what a thing is with how prettily it is made. You cannot satisfy a mouth with money. What can I give? Einar asked. If I must pay and cannot pay with coins. Helga looked at him the way birds look at the horizon. What do you have that is weighty to you? Not your boat. You would buy another. Not your net. You would tie another. Not even your house, though it would break your back to lose it. All these things are wood and rope and tin on the scale of a lake's hunger. It will take what you will feel the rest of your life when the light is at a certain angle. Do you understand me? I think so. He said hoarsely and put his head in his hands and saw in the red wash behind his eyes Elin's face when she was a baby. The first time she had fallen asleep against his chest. Ragnar's mouth when she laughed in the rain. His own father's hands teaching him how to tie a knot that would hold a world. He began to shake as if the cold had finally entered his marrow. Go home, Helga said kindly. Put your affairs in order. Do one generous thing without telling anyone. Do a second one that costs you. If you still mean to give the ring back, after that go to the lake at night, when the wind is not making any unnecessary noises, and call it by its name. Not the name of its kind. Its name. You have heard it already. He looked up startled. I have dreams are for many things, Helga said. One of those things is to give you names you do not want to say when you wake. On the way home, he gave the new motor part to Kari and said he had ordered the wrong thing. He told Ragnar the roof would need a different sort of sealant he could not afford, and then took the coins from the jar under the flower and left them at the widow Svala's door with a note that said only for the winter wood. He said nothing to Ragnar because he could not bear to make his goodness a show when his heart was full of bargaining. He sat at the table with his hands around his cup and listened to Elin's breathing and to the small noises houses make when they are thinking about spring. In the night, the wind stayed out on the heath, cursing stones. The lake lay flat as a statement that does not need explanation. Einar walked down to the shore with the ring in his palm. The fog was a veil. Spots of starlight had fallen into it and hung there like flies in milk. He could hear his own pulse. You, he said softly, because he could not bring himself to say the name. He tried again, a louder voice. You, with the weed in your mane. You. The dream had placed the name in him like a seed. Now he let it split. Kolgrim, he said. It was not a word he had ever spoken before, but it fit in his mouth the way an oath fits when it is exactly the one you mean. The fog twitched as if startled. Kolgrim, I am here to give you back what I should not have kept. The water bulged. That is the only word that will do it, bulged, and then a head lifted through it, and then the long grey neck, and then the body like a boat, turned wrong way up. The horse stood on the water like a thought does, supported by what cannot be seen. Its eyes were vast and empty of hatred, which is how you know hatred will not help you. It breathed, and the fog bowed around it. You brought a price, Kolgrim said, as if remarking on weather. I brought a ring, Einar said raggedly, and a price. He held out the silver. It shone without light. The ridges along it moved like the skin of something alive. The groove of runes shivered. What do you offer? Kolgrim asked. Another man's grief. It is lighter to carry, another man's joy. It is easier to spend. Einar closed his hand around the ring and felt it push against his skin like a tongue. I offer you, he said, and had to stop to breathe and begin again. I offer you the memory of the first time I held my daughter. I will keep all the rest. Her first tooth, her crooked whistle, the way she stands with her feet apart like a sailor. But that first time, I will not have any more. I will know it happened because everyone says it did. I will know the facts. But the heat of her, the weight of her, the way I understood suddenly that my body was a house that will be yours. Take care of it if a lake and a horse know what that means. The horse lifted its head. It closed its eyes. This is a price that tastes of bone, it said at last. It is not money. It lowered its mouth to the ring in Einar's hand and took the silver up between lips and teeth. The ring slid like a fish. Einar felt it leave not his hand, but somewhere deeper. The way you feel a tooth come out, not from your mouth, but from the story your mouth tells about you. Wait! He gasped stupidly because we always want to reverse ourselves at the moment we become brave. Kolgrim stopped. You may change your price, it said. Patient as weather. You may ask for wealth or safety, or for the taking of some enemy's name. I will take that price too. We will both regret it. Choose. I choose what I said. Einar whispered. The horse nodded its long head like a man. The ring vanished into its mouth. There was no crunch. There was no swallow. The horse turned its head toward the middle of the lake and tilted its ears as if listening to a bell no one else could hear. It is done, Kolgrim said. Nothing changed. The fog was fog. The water was water. Einar stood with his hand empty and felt nothing. That was the strangest of it. He did not feel sorrow. He did not feel relief. He felt a shape where something ought to be, a space in the cupboard of himself where a certain cup had always sat. He could name the cup. He could tell you when he bought it and what it had been for. He could not feel its weight in his hand. My daughter, he said, not even knowing what he meant to ask. She will be as she would have been if you had never imagined you could take more from a lake than a lake had to give, Kolgrim said. Which is to say, it denied him gently, and the denial was right. Go home, Einar, with the oars. You have other nets to mend than the ones for fish. He began to walk backward, because that is what stories tell you to do when you part from something you cannot see clearly. He put one foot behind the other in the wet sand. The fog pulled away from him. The lake returned to itself. When he turned to go up the path, he saw the birches, as if for the first time they were not pretending to be men. Ragnar was at the table with her hair down. She looked up the way a woman looks when she wants to be angry and wants not to be, and is weighing which will break her less. Einar sat down. The breath left his lungs and then came back. He told her everything because there was nothing else to do. He told her about the ring, the whisper, the price. He told her about being a man who wanted to be the size of his luck. Ragnar listened and cried, some not as a wife, but as a person who has been relieved of a weight she had been pretending not to feel. Then she came around the table and put her forehead on his and said, We will call what we can to mind, and we will write down the rest, so we don't have to carry it all in our bodies. Elin woke 2 mornings later with a thirst like a field. She drank, and then shouted. Because shouting is what children do when they come back from fever. They measure themselves against the world with their voice, and are pleased when the world does not fall over. Einar stood in the doorway and felt not a memory yet. The certainty of a story he had been told and believed because he trusted the mouths that told it. He went on fishing. The catches returned to their right size. Some months he had much, some months he had less. He learned what he had forgotten, to know that the rhythm of enough is finer than the drum of plenty. He mended nets. He brought Ragnar coffee in bed and stood at the door when Elin practiced her whistling and said it was like a redwing calling to spring. He passed Bryndis in the market, and she nodded once as if they had concluded business which they had. He left a piece of bread at the lake, sometimes the way his mother had left bread on the windowsill for the dead. Ragnar asked him once if he remembered the night Aelin was born, how she had cursed and laughed and cried in the same breath and said she hated him, and then, not 10 minutes later, would have died for him. He put his hands in the sink and said, "I know it happened. Tell me it again like a story." She did. He did not pretend to feel what he did not feel. She did not pretend to want him to. That winter, with the aurora walking on the ridgeline, like dancers who have never learned to be tired, Einar stood at the lake and listened. He did not expect to hear anything. He said the name Kolgrim under his breath once like a prayer that is not to a god, but to the shape of a promise. He thought of Helga's bees and Bryndis's knife nose, and of all the old women who keep the parts of the world that cannot be held by men who spend their days hauling one kind of weight or another. On Thretandin, the 13th day after Christmas, when people light bonfires and pretend the hidden people are less hidden than usual, he told his story for the first time. He told it badly because he was trying to be humble. Then he told it better because he understood that a good story is not a brag, but a bridge. He did not say the name in the telling. You don't give out a horse's true name like licorice. He told them about weight and balance, about rings and mouths, about how lakes are not gods, and how you must not treat them as if they were. He told them about paying without paying. He told them that if a thing returns to you after you have thrown it away, perhaps it belongs to something else entirely. Afterward, people came up and said the things people say when their stories are feeling the pressure to become truer. One man said his brother had found a coin in peat and his cows had died that winter. A girl said she had once seen hoof prints on the water, and they had not filled with water, which was how she knew they were hoof prints. An old woman said she had given the lake a pair of knitting needles and never again did her yarn tangle. Einar nodded where nodding seemed respectful and laughed where laughter did not wound anything. Ragnar, who knew him, took his hand and squeezed. Elin, who was of an age to be only interested in stories when they contained swords, rolled her eyes and then leaned into him because she was also of an age to be made of contradiction. Years after, when the roof needed work again and the sheep were old, and Elin was walking the shore with a boy who could lift a net alone, Einar sometimes felt at the back of his mouth the echo of a hollow that had once held a ring. Not the ring itself, but the habit of having contained it. He would catch himself touching that place with his tongue, the way a man touches an old scar when the weather threatens rain. The ache never turned to bitterness. It turned to a kind of useful emptiness, the way a bowl is useful because it is not full of something else. He went only once, to the far shore in summer, when the birches were leafed out like ladies leaning over mirrors. He walked where the bank gave onto the water in a little shelf. He found nothing, a fact that pleased him more than a find would have. On the way back along the shore, he saw in the wet sand at the edge, where the smallest waves had folded and refolded the shape of a hoof print, only one. It did not fill with water, as the speech of the girl long ago had promised. It held the shape of the sky for a long time, and then the next small wave came, and the sky went with it. He stood and looked until his eyes burned. Then he went home to tell Ragnar that he had seen nothing, and to let her make from his nothing a story that would outlast them both. People still find things in Lake Lagarfljót. Coins, spoons, a brooch in the shape of a fish with its mouth open. Once a man found a bell that made no sound when he struck it, because the sound had long ago gone to live under the water with other sounds that could not be bothered to come back. From time to time, someone finds a ring. Sometimes they keep it. Sometimes they throw it away and it comes back. Sometimes they go to Bryndis or Helga or the church or the bar and ask for a shape to hold their fear. Sometimes they take the ring down to the shore in their palm at night, and call out a name they did not know they knew. The lake rises and falls. It is not a god, but there is a horse in it who knows the weight of bargains. If you have ever asked for more than you ought and been given it, you know that this is true. If you have ever paid with something you could not explain to anyone else and not regretted it, you know it also. That is the secret Iceland keeps the one under the fog, the one in the birch shadow, the one that sits at the table between the butter and the bread, and waits for you to speak first. Einar grew old in the way fishermen do, a little bowed by weather and a little carved by joy. He outlived the motor by 3 times. He buried sheep and friends and the boy who had walked with Ailin on the shore, but turned into a different man somewhere along the way, as boys will. He watched Ellin's child hold a fish for the first time and laugh in a way that made him think of bells that had run away to live in lakes. He kept the habit of leaving bread for the dead and sometimes a bit of apple for a horse. On the night he died, which was in late autumn when the nights fall as fast as secrets from careless mouths, he dreamed again of hooves. Kolgrim came to him not as a threat and not as a debt collector, but as a thing that had once been bound to him and had released him, and was curious how he had managed. Einar reached out a hand that did not shake and laid it on the long grey face. He did not remember the first time he had held Elin. He did not want it back. He had been full of other firsts, the first time he forgave himself for seeking too much, the first time he told his story without pride, the first time he understood that a ring, like a word, is most dangerous when you cannot bear the idea of it leaving your mouth. "I gave you a good price," he said in his dream, bold as a boy. "You did?" Kolgrim agreed, and then laughed, though the sound was like waves. "And I have carried it with care. Not out of kindness, out of duty to bargains well struck." Einar woke, smiled, and did not wake again. In the morning, fog lay over the lake. It had bones. People swore they heard from very far away a bell tolling under the water. Ragnar lit a candle in the window, though the dead do not get lost in Iceland and do not need such guideposts. We light them anyway because we are human. Elin stood at the shore with her child, and the child said, "Mama, look, a footprint," and pointed where the water and the sand had made a shape that could be a hoof, or could be the space where a wave had dared to sit a moment longer than waves are entitled to. "It is only water," Elin said, which was true. Then she added, because she had grown up in a house where truth had never been allowed to crowd the miraculous into corners, and perhaps a horse. The lake, hearing itself called both what it is and what it is to a story, lifted its flat chest and brought down a small, contented breath. The light moved on its back. Somewhere below, where the silver goes to think about time, a ring lay at ease in a mouth that had once taken more than it should. Bargains, like rivers, find their level. And if you listen on winter mornings when the fog is up and the birches have gone spare, you can hear a whisper in the air that is not quite a voice and not quite a dream, saying what all such creatures love to say when the nets are mended and the stories told. "We fill your nets, you balance them.